And in that sefer, we are on page 94. The booklet it's 8. We're starting with, we'll go back a few lines, start from the beginning of Ois Hey. Let's again get the flow of the Maimon. The flow of the Maimon is that in the first chapter, he explained that Lech Lecha is based on the fact that there are two parts to the neshama. Oh, welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's good to be back.
Okay. And two parts to the neshama. One is the part of the neshama that's up there, in the Maila. The other is the part of the neshama that's in the guf. So you can get one of these booklets. This is what we're doing. After that, in the second chapter, he explained that the main avodah is to make the connection to the neshama which is in the guf should be connected to the neshama l'mayla. And when does this happen? This happens, and this takes place during davening. That's what davening is all about. And that's what the ladder is all about. That the ladder represents davening. We're connecting the neshama l'mata with the neshama l'mayla. And then he explains that why is the ladder standing on, why does the Torah emphasize the ladder standing on the ground, on the earth? And why does the Torah emphasize that Lech Lecha me'aretzecha, Avraham Avinu went away from one land and went to another land, emphasizing the word Eretz, thank you. And so for this, he explains that Eretz is in a bittul. And the davening has to be based on bittul. And then he goes on to say not only davening, but everything in spirituality has to be based on davening, because that is what makes a person a caliph of a kus. So in chapter 3, he explained how this is like a molek. Yeshus is a molek, and how that leads to all other negative character traits. In chapter 4, he explains how Yeshus also prevents a person from doing all the positive things. And even if a person does positive things, it prevents him from being a caliph of the kus. So he'll learn, he'll daven, he'll do mitzvahs, but to be able to feel the godliness in it, if there's yeshus, that won't allow the person to be the proper caliph. So now, after explaining how crucial bittul is and how that's the key to everything, this chapter is going to explain, so how does a person overcome that? How does a person make themselves have more bittul? So we'll start again. We'll back up a little bit. So in the beginning of Hey, V'hine, what is the advice? Lachniya hagasus, to subdue this coarseness and this arrogance. In order to know how to get rid of the arrogance, we have to know what's causing the arrogance, which means that it's definitely different possibilities of what can cause arrogance. So he starts off with the following. In if the person feels this way because he learned a lot of Torah, or similar things, which means because he achieved a lot. Torah, he achieved a lot in mitzvahs, he achieved a lot in things that are really full of content. So what should he do? A person should actually designate time. In other words, there shouldn't be just a thought that's I think about it. It passes through my mind. No, it should be something like making an appointment with my brain to spend time and think about this subject. That Baruch Hashem, I succeeded, and I have achieved a lot in Torah study. But to think about there's no reason to feel proud of this, which we explained yesterday. The feeling of pride means, and to look down on others that haven't achieved this, which is natural for a person to feel that way. I think most of us do that a whole day long, comparing in everything. What I have, what they have, what I don't have, what they don't have, what's more, who's deserved, doesn't deserve. All these thoughts are swimming in our heads. So the person who's successful in Torah study sort of looks down at someone that did not achieve as much as they did. So first of all, let's think of the words of Chazal. Omer Chazal, our sages say, if you studied a lot of Torah, and obviously you achieved and you have the knowledge now, you have a lot of knowledge of Torah, don't give yourself that credit for that. In other words, that shouldn't inflate your ego. And why not? That's what you were created for. The Rebbe once pointed out that who's the one that says these words? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. The Gemara says Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lived to the age of 120, like Moshe Rabbeinu, and he spent his whole life on learning Torah. He didn't take any. The Gemara says he didn't walk 4 cubits without Torah and without tefillin, and he was totally immersed in a spiritual world. To a certain extent, it appears that he was like the Moshe Rabbeinu of that generation. Nevertheless, he said, there's nothing to be proud of, nothing to boast about. After all, that's what you were created for. Hashem created you for that purpose. There's no point, and it doesn't make any sense to be proud of something. I do something more than expected, more than I'm meant to do, and I sort of go over the top. That's something that you can feel proud about. But if somebody has an obligation to do something, and I do what I'm obligated to do, and not only obligated, that my whole creation, the fact that I'm here in this world, is in order to do this. And if the person wouldn't do these things, chas v'shalom, he's not fulfilling the purpose for which he was created. So if I'm doing something which is what it's all about, we could also add another thing, which the Rebbe says often, is that by Hashem, when he gives us a command to do something, it's not only telling us what to do, but by giving us the command, that itself empowers us that we're able to do it. So basically, Hashem tells us you have a shlichus, and He's also created us in a way that we have all the tools to do our shlichus. He empowers us that we should overcome our Yetzer Hara and do it. In fact, that's what the beginning of Tanya is all about, that they give a oath to the neshama, al ti tzaddik, al ti rasha, it should be a tzaddik. As we know, whoever learned Tanya knows that the oath means they give it the neshama additional koyach, that they should be able to overcome any kind of challenges, and then they actually do it. So what's the big deal? That's what I should be thinking about. If someone does something which is beyond, then they can feel that way. But basically, whatever I'm doing, that's what I was created for. And of course, what if the person says, but I'm doing beyond, because that person only knows 100 pages of Gemara, and I know 500 pages of Gemara. So the answer is, the reason why you know 500 is because that's what Hashem gave you the capacity to do. And that person perhaps doesn't have the ability or the capacity to know 500 pages of Gemara. So again, I'm only doing what I was meant to do, what I'm obligated to do, and I'm just fulfilling my obligations. But when you meet, a lot of times when you meet a policeman who helped you, did something with you, and you say, thank you so much, they usually answer, they have a line, they say, well, I'm just doing my job, So basically, I should say, I'm just doing my job. What's the big deal here? So that's number one. And there's another thing to know. The Kama Shalom, and as much I've learned, I haven't even come near the real depth of the Chochmas HaTorah. And there's a pasuk that says, Omek, Omek, it's deep and deeper than deep. Who could find it? The Torah is longer than the earth, or and it's wider than the ocean. Just from the fact that the Gemara says that if a person hears Torah from his teacher, we're not talking about a regular teacher, meaning a teacher who is one of the sages, the Gemara says that it'll take 40 years to really understand the full depth. Remember what we're talking about. We're talking about one sage learning from another sage. We're not talking about an ordinary person learning from a sage, or an ordinary person learning Torah from an ordinary person. We're talking about a sage learning Torah from an older sage, and this is his Rebbe. Nevertheless, it would take 40 years to fully understand the depth of what his Rebbe gave over. So basically, it means that the depth that's in Torah is so much more than what you see on the surface. And therefore, even though I have all this knowledge, but I realize how far I am from fully, completely understanding the real depth of the subject. If this would register, the word just ames, I underlined it, it's an interesting word. It really comes from the word emes. But yis ames, basically on grammar, it becomes, I guess in English you would say, emismatized in my head. In other words, it registers in my head. I recognize the emes of it. Not just I think about it, but it registers like das. It really penetrates. And he understands how I did not come anywhere near the true depth of the Torah. So as a result of that, he won't feel that feeling of superiority. I guess this in itself takes meditation to understand and to meditate on this detail. How is it that, let me understand how I don't understand what there is in Torah. You know, there's a quote, it's brought down in Chassidus. I'm not sure who the source of the quote is, but Tachlis HaYediyah, the ultimate point of reaching the ultimate level of knowledge when you're learning about Hashem, what is it? That I don't understand you. That's why a lot of people say, what do I need to learn Chassidus? I'm already there. I don't understand anything. The difference is if I don't understand, or I understand that I don't understand. It's a world of a difference. The ultimate of knowledge, the more I understand how much that I don't understand. I understand that there's more depth. So this is two things to have what to think about. And there's another thought to think about. What did the Torah do to me? How did the Torah affect me? How did the Torah transform me? In other words, of course, this is based on the premise that Torah is not just knowledge. Any other subject is knowledge. Math is knowledge, and science is knowledge, and medicine is knowledge, and history is knowledge. So one might think, and there are people, unfortunately, who approach Torah that way, it's also knowledge. It's knowledge of the laws of Judaism, the history of Judaism, but Torah is not knowledge. In fact, why is it called Torah? It should be Chokhmah. Anyone know what the word Torah means?
Like teaching.
Teaching, right? Hira. If the Rebbe hadn't said this 10,000 times, I don't know. Every time the Rebbe would speak about something, he would say, Torah is miloshen hira. That the word Torah, the root of the word is teaching. Everything in Torah is about teaching us how to act. It's guiding us. And therefore, a person has to ask himself, yes, I studied a lot of Torah, but what does the Torah do for me? Like that story that I told you with the Alter Rebbe, when the Alter Rebbe said, he told me everything you taught the Torah. What did the Torah teach you? There's also an interesting story with one of the students of the Mezritcha Maggid. I don't remember which student it was, but he was a brilliant Torah scholar, a giant of a Torah scholar, and he heard about the controversy of Hasidim and non-Hasidim, and he was curious to know what Hasidus is really all about. And if the Maggid of Mezritch is really that great of a person as they make him. So he went to meet the Maggid, and he told the Maggid he'd like to have a Torah discussion with him. So the Maggid said, let us speak to my student, Rav Zusha. He was very offended. Here he's a Torah scholar, and he's coming to another Torah scholar to have a discussion with him, and he's not ready to talk to him. So that was strike one. Okay. Then he goes to Reb Zusha, who was one of the students. Of course, later he became the famous Rebbe, Reb Zusha. And he says, the Rebbe sent me to you to discuss some Torah subject with you. So, oh, yeah, great. I'm right now in the middle of something which I don't understand. Maybe you can help me understand it. So what is it? The Gemara talks about the fact that you need a minyan. You need 10 people in order to have a minyan for davening. And the Gemara asks, if you have 9 people, but in the room there's also the Ark, which means the ark, where you keep the Torah scroll in it, could that be used as a tent? So the Gemara says, what, the ark is a person? No, so we can't use it. So yeah, what was the question in the first place? What did the Gemara think? An ark which contains the Torah scroll is a person? What was the Gemara's point? They say, yeah, good question. I don't know. So I'll tell you what I'm thinking. The ark is full of Torah, but the piece of wood and the ark hasn't changed. It's still an ark and a piece of wood. It's full of Torah, but the Torah didn't change the closet that it contains the Torah in it. So the Gemara said that can be used for a minyan. When he heard these words, it registered in him that, I mean, you could be full of Torah, but you haven't been transformed. Then he decided, okay, this is what I want. He became a chassid. So this is what he's saying. What did the Torah teach you? How did the Torah change me? And he should be one of those people who make an accounting. This is a term that's found in Chassidus very often. I think the literal translation of the word is Aramaic, but the literal translation would be More means master of Chujna, of accounting. If this would be Begashmi, this would be simply a person who's an accountant, knows how to do accounting of money. But here it means Mara Chuzma, a master of accounting, a spiritual accounting, making taking stock of myself. Where am I holding? What have I accomplished? What could have I accomplished? And of course, the purpose of that is not to get depressed, but in this context, the purpose is if I see that the yeshus is growing, this is the way I could calm down my Yetzer Hara. And what is the chumar, the chujbana? What is the counting? To think into prote machshava dibra ma'isa, to think about his thoughts, his words, his actions. V'im yimotze, and if we'll find she'elam kedaboylam mehevi, that's not really the way it should be, and he finds that he actually is doing things that are not so appropriate according to Torah, either in speech, not careful with lashon hara, but not careful with lying, or not careful with anger, not careful with his thoughts, should be proper and not unrefined thoughts. If that is true, he's actually lower than a person who hasn't studied Torah. Because Chaverei, his friend, who doesn't know Torah, had he been learning Torah, I probably would have been doing much better because the Torah would have lifted him and inspired him. But the light of Torah didn't affect me. Again, the knowledge is there, but we keep emphasizing Torah is not just knowledge. Torah contains a brilliant, infinite light, which is the light of Hashem. And that light of Hashem is supposed to transform me, supposed to refine me. So I say to myself that I'm learning Torah. It's not only that I didn't accomplish anything, but then the fact that I didn't change is even worse than someone who hadn't learned. Move on means that group of Mashem and Nasas Atzma Gudim that Torah. In fact, this in itself, that I feel superior and I'm looking down on others that are less than me, that in itself is a result of the fact that the Torah didn't change me, didn't affect me. Because I'm doing the opposite of what Torah is meant to be accomplishing. In other words, not only I'm not taking advantage of Torah, but by doing that, it's the opposite of what the purpose of Torah is all about. The whole purpose of the Torah and the light in Torah, the godliness in Torah. Tzarech little bittul benafshe, it's supposed to create bittul. What's the, where do we see the connection? Because it says eraisa mechochma napkes. Eraisa means the Torah comes from chochma, and chochma is bittul. This is very common in Chassidus. That's why I also underlined it as one of the terms. That chochma is two words. You find this already in Tanya. Chochma is koyach ma, which means potential, a ma of something which we can't grasp. But it's based on the words in the Chumash, where Moshe Rabbeinu, when the Yidden came to him with certain complaints, and to him and to Aaron, Moshe said, "V'nachnu ma, who are we? We're nothing. Why are you complaining to us?" So the word ma represents that quote, who are we? What are we? Chachma brings bittul. V'lochein chachma yois yud, and that's why chachma, we know that everything is represented in the letters of the alphabet. The yud represents chachma. I would think something like chachma, which is the wealthiest, the most, the biggest quality that there is in the universe, is wisdom, should be presented by a letter of the alphabet that has a little bit more substance to it, something bigger. It's presented in a little tiny yud, because the yud is inyan iris gamma. The yud means, again, this is Aramaic. It means that it's very small. It makes itself small. Because Chochma is the closest to Ein Sof, the more closest someone is to Hashem, the more insignificant they feel. When we were celebrating Yutas Kislev, we were studying the chapter 2 in Igeres HaKodesh, the letter the Alter Rebbe wrote. I'm just reminding you, and in that letter, the Alter Rebbe writes, what's the difference between Chesed of Kedusha and Chesed of Klippa? Which is a Chesed that's associated with Avraham Avinu, or Chesed that's associated with Yishmael? And the answer is that in Yishmael's world, the more Chesed Hashem gives you, the more arrogant you become. There was a person who succeeds, whether he succeeds financially, whether he succeeds in education, whether he succeeds in rising to power, whichever success he has makes him more arrogant because he attributes all that to himself. In Kedusha, not only being more successful doesn't make me more arrogant, but just the opposite. The more success I have and the more bracha I have, the more I feel humility. And the Alter Rebbe asks, what's the connection? And the Alter Rebbe explains, because when you have a bracha in your life, you're basically feeling Hashem is close to you. And the closer you are to Hashem, the more you feel bittul, the more you feel insignificant. It's like feeling bittul towards someone who's greater than me, smarter than me, or is greater than me in righteousness. The more I know his greatness, the more I'm aware of how he's greater than me, the more I feel insignificant. So the closer I am to Hashem, the more I feel insignificant. So when a person has something coming from Hashem to me, he's doing something for me, he's giving me brachas, and basically means Hashem is being close to me. In terms of the spheres, the closest sphere to Ein Sof, to the infinite, is Chochmah. Right? On the chart, the highest sphere is Chochmah. And that's the closest to Ein Sof. Besides the fact that Alter Rebbe also says in Tanya that the only place where Ein Sof shines in terms of the spheres is only in one sphere, only in the sphere of Chochmah. And that is because Chochmah has bittul. So even though Ein Sof, Hashem's infinite light, is connected to everything, but everything it's connected to is because of that component. There's a Chochmah component in everything, and because of the Chochmah in it, that's why Ein Sof could be there. So basically, Chochmah is Torah, and Torah has Ein Sof in it. So that's why if a person studies Torah, which means the Ein Sof, the Or Ein Sof is shining in him, that should make the person feel more bittul. So again, let's go over inside what these words mean. That the chokhmah is yud, and yud means azir is gameh, that it makes a person small. Small meaning bittul, insignificant compared to Hashem. And the reason is mipnei akiru, the b'chinas chokhmah, the orin sabarchu, because the closeness. Because there's a quote, kol sheyose kamei yose kaloi. In other words, the original quote is everything in the presence of Hashem is like nothing. So the Alter Rebbe adds, therefore, the more you are in Hashem's presence, the closer you are in Hashem's presence, the more nothing you feel. And therefore, Torah, which is Hashem's chokhmah, he po'eles bittul benafshe. That's why it brings a person to have more bittul. Otherwise, it would be very hard to understand. How could it be that a person is successful? He knows Torah inside out. He knows the whole entire Shas. He could repeat it to you verbatim. You know, we're talking about tzaddikim. Their knowledge of Torah was like absolutely shocking, beyond our comprehension of the way they knew and understood. I mean, you know, just to give an example, the famous story with the Tzemach Tzedek and the Rabbi Marash. That when the Rabbi Marash was a little boy, he used to get spending money every month. What did he do with his money? He bought Svarim. He bought Torah books. The Babich was a small shtetl, and it didn't have a store that sold Svarim because there weren't enough people to be able to support such a business. So if somebody wanted to buy a sefer, they either had to travel to a bigger city, or they were traveling Svarim salesmen. There was those days everything was horse and wagon. So there was a person that had a wagon full of Svarim. He would stop off in different small places, and he had his round every month or two. He'd come around these small places. Whoever needed to buy a sefer would buy the sefer. So what happened was that this wagon driver, the person who was selling the Svarim came around, and the Rebbe Marash wanted to buy more Svarim, but he didn't have any money. He was already spent all his money. So he came to the Tzemach Tzedek and said, could you please give me my spending money in advance? So his father said, what do you need in advance? So he said, because the person who sells the Svarim is here now and I want to buy more Svarim. So Tzemach Tzedek says, and the Svarim you have, you already know everything. So Rebbe Marash said, I looked around the room. My father's room looked like this. From the floor to the ceiling was shelves of Svarim, all four walls. And then there was Svarim in another room. And today, when the person who sold the Svarim came, my father bought a new box of Svarim. So in the other room, there was a carpenter building a new bookcase. So basically, there are thousands of Svarim here. My father's buying new Svarim. So I said to my father, and all the Svarim that are in this room, you know already that you're buying new Svarim. So Tzemach Tzedek said, test me. And obviously that was part of it. So he walked over to the bookcase, pulled out a sefer. The first sefer he pulled out was not a sefer that's commonly studied. It was a sefer with grammar, rules of grammar according to Torah. And he told the Tzemach Tzedek the name of the sefer and the page number. And the Tzemach Tzedek told him what it says there, verbatim. And he pulled out another sefer. I think it says which one it was also. And again, the same thing. And then a third time. After the third time, he stopped. But could you imagine such vast knowledge of Torah? That every sefer in the room, you can just walk over, say the name of the book and the page number. We can't do it with one sefer or half a sefer. So we're talking about vast knowledge of Torah. And nevertheless, what is it? The more Torah I study, that was the question I began to say. How does it make sense? If a person has so much success and knows so much, naturally that should make them feel more arrogant. And the answer is no, because they're studying Torah. The more you study Torah, the more you feel connected to Hashem. The more you feel connected to Hashem, the more you feel insignificant. Do you remember this phrase about a candle in the daylight, during daylight time? The Gemara says, why don't we search for chametz during the day? Why do we search at night? And the Gemara answers, because when the sun is shining, the candlelight is insignificant. In other words, a little candle in the presence of the sunlight is insignificant. You can hardly even see it. So the closer I am to the sunlight, the more insignificant. If I take a candle and I move it away from the sunlight, I bring it into a room where there is less sun or there's no sun, then the candlelight becomes nice and bright. So mizeh, and the fact that the person feels arrogant for learning Torah, from this itself is understood how far he is from learning Torah the proper way. If a person would spend a while and do this from time to time, not just one time, but do it from time to time, or similar thoughts, you fail benafshe. This will help him fail. Achna v'shiflus, humility towards Hashem. So this is the first thing. If the arrogance comes from his success and vast knowledge of Torah. Now he says something different. What if it's a different reason? If it's just something natural. Just naturally, who chamri v'gas, he repeats it in Yiddish. The person grew up, meaning just a coarse personality, and because he has a coarse personality, so he doesn't feel things that are higher. He just very much feels himself more than anything else. Okay, don't get scared the next few lines. This is one of those things that we don't do it this way, we do it a different way, but this is what it's in a mimer, so of course we're learning it and we have to know how to adapt it to our time. But this is what it says. Then the person needs to be crushed because the arrogance comes from coarseness, you have to take away the coarseness. The famous quote of the Rosh Yeshiva in the upstairs yeshiva. There's the yeshiva in Shemayim, and there's a Rosh Yeshiva there. It's called Rav Mesivta, the Rav of the yeshiva in Shemayim. How do we know what he's doing in his shir? It's quoted in the Zohar. And what did he say? These words. This is found in Tanya, famous chapter in Tanya, chapter 29. If you have a block of wood that's so thick that the fire doesn't catch, how do you get it to catch fire? You have to break it up to smaller pieces. And then, if it's broken up into smaller pieces, the fire will catch. But as long as it's a very thick log, the way it is, it's so thick, the fire wouldn't catch. There's a goof, a body, a person who's physically, the body is so coarse that the light of the neshama doesn't catch. Mivachale also has to be crushed, the Savak Nahira, and then the light will catch on that goof that he'll be able to be on fire with love for Hashem and everything else. What does that mean? Crush the goof. So this is the person doing things which are sort of self-inflicted suffering, which we don't do today. Like I said, these are things that years ago people would deprive themselves from eating, deprive themselves from other things, sleeping. People would go into gullus, which means they would leave home and be homeless for a few months wherever they went. They just sat down in the shul and studied Torah. They did different things. The purpose was to break the coarseness of the body. And if you break the coarseness of the body, it's more of a keli to catch onto the light of the neshama, the fire of the neshama. Now, I hope you remember, because we spoke about this Yom Kippur when we spoke about fasting, and the Alter Rebbe says today we don't fast, instead we give tzedakah instead of fasting. So the key explanation to what the difference is is, generally speaking, Gashmius contradicts Ruchnius. And that's why there's an expression in the Zohar that the stronger and the more coarse the guf is, and the weaker the neshama is. The stronger the neshama is, the weaker the guf is. So basically, by weakening the guf, we're strengthening, giving the neshama a chance to get stronger. But why? Because they're on a seesaw. They contradict each other. What's going to happen when Mashiach comes, it's not just that godliness will be revealed in this world. There were times before that godliness was revealed in this world. But that godliness will be revealed in the world, and the world will continue as a Gashmizdika world, the way we know it, which means there'll be a merging of Ruchnis and Gashmis. That'll be the main sort of novelty of the time of Mashiach. That Gashmis and Ruchnis will no longer be a contradiction, and they go together. So the closer we are to Mashiach, and to that time, the more we're able to experience that merging. And that's why starting from the Baal Shem Tov, which is the time that the hidden secrets of Torah began to be revealed, which means that was the time that we turned a corner in terms of getting closer to the times of Mashiach. That's when he started to promote the idea that we shouldn't be fasting, we shouldn't do any of these things which are self-infliction, because these are things that deny the body's involvement with Ruchnius. And now is the time where we have to engage the body with Ruchnius. We have to bring the two together. So let's first see what he says, and let's see how we can adapt it to our times now. This will you also have in Tanya, which is iskafia. If a person has a strong desire to eat something which is very tasty, I refrain from doing that. And that's also something which sort of crushes the body. Like a person who's unfortunately a poor person, struggling to make ends meet on a basic level, that this person usually is not an arrogant person, usually a humble person, simply because Begashmis is so broken, so it also breaks his spirit. When a person does that to himself, that itself will break the coarseness, and that'll bring the person to feel more humble. And by being more humble, so the fact that we see begashmias, that if a person would do these kind of things, they wouldn't only be breaking their guf, they'll be breaking their spirit also. We don't want to accomplish that. As we see, people who deprive themselves of these kind of things, they get sick, they don't feel well, they get depressed, it just does the opposite. So it's not like people think, being that physically we can't handle it, we have to do things differently. It's the other way around. Being that now the avodah is to include the guf, not to distance ourselves from the guf, Hashem made that we can't handle it. Because if a person goes into this kind of path, this is what it leads to. It leads to depression, it leads to weakness, it leads to headaches, it leads to not feeling good. So, chas v'shalom, to go down that path. But let me ask a question. What if a person would do the same thing, not by not eating, but I really have this real gishmaka, juicy lashon hara, and I stop myself from saying it? How does that feel? What I'm saying is I'm not doing anything to my body physically, but I have a strong desire to say something about something I heard about a certain person. I know everybody around me is going to appreciate to hear this news, because people love to hear this kind of juicy news, and I'm not going to say it. That's also breaking myself, but not in a physical way. So I guess there are other ways of doing this avodah without chas v'shalom touching the physical body. But even this, if I'm pretty clear that by the Rebbe today, even this is not the emphasis in the avodah. The avodah is just to bring in more godliness into my life, learn more chassidus, learn more about the greatness of Hashem, And then naturally that will help get rid of the coarseness and the arrogance. So I would say, so what's the advice how to work on the arrogance? I think the advice is very simple, just to learn more Chassidus. And if someone says, I learned a lot of Chassidus that didn't help, so there's a famous Chassidish Shabbat that just like somebody would say, I don't believe you that drinking vodka makes a person drunk. I drank a cup of vodka and I didn't get drunk. So the person's answer would be, well, obviously you didn't drink enough. Take another cup. I took another cup. I still didn't get drunk. Just keep going. Eventually, there's no way you're not going to get drunk. Obviously, you need more to get you drunk. Chassidus helps. If I learned Chassidus, I didn't make bittul, learn a little bit more. If it still didn't help, learn a little bit more. But ultimately, learning Chassidus makes a person feel bittul. Somebody wants to ask the question, maybe the opposite will happen. If I learn Chassidus, I'll have even more gaiva, more arrogance, because now not only I know the revealed part of Torah, I also know another part of Torah. So I have more of a reason to be arrogant. So he gave you a very interesting answer. Another minute, I'll steal time for the next teacher. The interesting answer was that there's a halacha, we all know the halacha, that before Pesach, we have to search the house, even for a crumb of chametz. Why do we have to do that with chametz? Why not a lot of other things that are not allowed to be eaten, and you don't eat them, you don't even have to throw them out of the house, and you surely don't have to go searching for crumbs. Why is chametz so much more that we have to make sure there's nothing left in the house? So the answer the Gemara gives is because other things are treif all year round. Chametz is something which is kosher all year round, and we eat it all year round. So if a person would come across chametz in the middle of Pesach, they might forget themselves and eat it. If you come across something which is treif, you're not going to forget yourself. You never eat this food. So because we normally eat, let's say, cake or pretzels or whatever, and I stick my hand in my pocket and I find a pretzel, I might forget myself and eat it. So then the Gemara asks, what happens if you find chametz on Pesach? So during Chol Hamoed, you're supposed to burn it. Why aren't we afraid? If you're going to take it and burn it, you might end up eating it. So the Gemara answers, because you're now occupied with burning it, you're not going to forget and start eating it. So the Chassid said, being that Chassidus is all about getting rid of the yeshus, so it's not gonna make me become a yesh. It's all about burning it, not doing the opposite. Okay, to be continued.
Thank you.